interesting things coming out of in the aftermath of the capture of Nicolas Maduro. This from the Epoch Times reporting in Zero Hedge how Chinese-made radar defense systems failed in Venezuela. U.S. forces stormed into Venezuela before dawn January 3rd, captured Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores in a lightning operation that punched in and out of Caracas before its air defenses could mount an effective response. The operation resulted in no U.S. fatalities and no loss of U.S. military equipment, according to U.S. officials. The U.S. mission, codenamed Operation Absolute Resolve, has quickly become more than a political shockwave. Analysts have said it is also a real-world test of U.S. military power against a country that has spent years buying Chinese and Russian-made air defense systems and showcasing them as proof it could deter Washington. The raid raised uncomfortable questions for Beijing about the limits of the Chinese-supplied systems that Venezuela has leaned on, especially anti-stealth radar that China advertised capable of spotting and stopping U.S. stealth aircraft. A military analyst telling the Epoch Times, the most damaging takeaway for China is not the failure of a single piece of equipment. It's what the operation suggested about deeper weaknesses, corruption in China's defense industry, lack of reliability of the technology, and command structure meant to tie those systems together. In other words, the best that the Chinese could give the Venezuelans is cheap Chinese knockoff garbage, absolute rubbish. And it shows, because these systems failed, and the now former leader of Venezuela has been deposed, captured by Delta Force. Yu Sun-chi, a retired Major General from Taiwan, former president of the Political Warfare College at Taiwan's National Defense University, said, "A system built to look modern on paper and intimidating in propaganda falls apart under the demands of real combat." He said Beijing's performance claims often lean more on messaging than combat validation. China condemned the capture of Maduro and accused Washington of acting as a world judge in a blunt response that underscored how closely Beijing saw the fallout tied to its influence and credibility in Latin America. This has been quite an embarrassing blow for both the Chinese and the Russians in this part of the world. They have been thoroughly embarrassed by all of this. This simple operation, as I don't think is an exaggeration to say, they've been made a laughingstock. To give you some background on what happened, President Donald Trump ordered the operation 10:46 p.m. Eastern Time, January 2nd, according to Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane. I believe this is the fellow they know that is known as Raising Cane. Aircraft launched from about 20 land and sea bases across the Western Hemisphere, and the helicopter force approached Venezuela at roughly 100 feet above the water to maintain the element of surprise. Within 5 hours, by 3:29 a.m. Eastern Time, U.S. forces had Maduro and Flores aboard the USS Iwo Jima, an amphibious assault ship. They were then flown over to the United States. For years, Venezuela has spent heavily on Chinese and Russian equipment while claiming it was building one of the region's most modern defense systems. But in recent months, reports have highlighted Venezuela's installation of Chinese-made JY-27A radar units, marketed as able to detect low observable aircraft, exactly the kind of system meant to complicate U.S. operations involving stealth platforms. That promise did not hold on January 3rd. Yu said neither Chinese nor Russian air defense systems made the slightest bit of difference once the United States brought real-time intelligence, electronic warfare, and precision weapons to bear. The real contest, he said, was not just radar range or missile specs, but a fast chain of detection, communications, decision-making, and joint execution, exactly where weaker militaries tend to break. Beyond radar, Venezuela has also displayed and fielded Chinese-made ground systems that Beijing has marketed abroad, from VN-16 amphibious assault vehicles and VN-18 infantry fighting vehicles to Chinese rocket artillery systems. Venezuelan parades in recent years have showcased those platforms as symbols of a growing partnership and a tougher military posture. But Yu said glossy displays don't matter much if the wider network of sensors, communications, command, training, and logistics can't hold up under pressure. Yu said the People's Liberation Army has not fought a major war since 1979, and it studies foreign conflicts in part because it lacks large-scale recent battlefield feedback of its own. So that's what happens when you shop on Temu, chat, especially for your radar systems. This was an interesting article by Data Republican. Seen like a state, dying like a citizen, how Trump's capture of Maduro broke the system. To understand why Maduro's Venezuela was useful to the foreign policy order, we need a concept rarely spoken outside foreign policy circles, yet central to how states operate: legibility. The term comes from Seen Like a State by James C. Scott, arguably the most important book for understanding how modern power actually functions. Scott's core insight is that states do not perceive society the same way citizens do. They see schemas, obstructions designed for administration. A quote from the book: legibility implies a viewer whose place is central and whose vision is synoptic. State simplifications of the kind we have examined are designed to provide authorities with a schematic view of their society, a view not afforded to those without authority. Rather like U.S. highway patrolmen wearing mirrored sunglasses, the authorities enjoy a quasi-monopolistic picture of selected aspects of the whole society. This privileged vantage point is typical of all institutional settings where command and control of complex human activities is paramount. The monastery, the barracks, the factory floor, and the administrative bureaucracy, private or public, exercise many state-like functions and often mimic its information structure as well. Legibility is about control. A state is a central authority that must be able to see its population in order to act upon it. To govern, it must render society readable. Names, addresses, property lines, tax categories, employment status, production figures, what cannot be enumerated cannot be administered. Another quote: if we imagine a state that has no reliable means of enumerating or locating its population, gauging its wealth, mapping its land, resources, and settlements, we're imagining a state whose inventions in our society are necessarily crude. A society that is relatively opaque to the state is thereby insulated from some forms of finely tuned state interventions, both welcomed and resented. Anyways, let's see if we can skip a bit to get to the meat and potatoes of this article here. International order does not depend on whether a regime is virtuous, it depends on whether a regime is legible. Moral language obscures this fact, but bureaucratic systems do not run on virtue. They run on data, interface, compliance, predictability. That's the lifeblood of bureaucracy, actually. This is an implicit reason that NGOs have saturated nearly every country on the earth. NGOs raise the legibility of societies to the entire foreign policy apparatus by standardizing information flows. Voter rolls, civil society networks, labor organizations, media ecosystems, human rights reporting, election monitoring, development metrics. They convert opaque societies into data sets that can be acted upon at a distance. In this sense, NGOs are extensions of the world order. They are prosthetic eyes. The foreign policy establishment is condemning Trump's actions in Venezuela by invoking regime change. This framing is disingenuous. The apparatus performs regime change constantly all over the world, softly, incrementally, bureaucratically, while reserving the term only for the actions it does not control. The real question is whether or not the Trump administration was justified in attempting to remove Maduro. That question accepts the apparatus's model framing and misses the structural issue entirely. The correct question is this: how did Maduro's continued existence make the world more legible to the foreign policy apparatus, and why did losing him threaten that legibility? That is a good question. Why is it that so many people just fell all over themselves because Maduro was deposed? And the key idea to hold is that Venezuela under Maduro never became administratively unintelligible. It did not dissolve into the chaos seen in Libya or Iraq. Oil continued to move through identifiable channels, even under sanctions. Flights continued and could be monitored. NGOs managed the refugee outflow, converting mass displacement into innumerable populations and reportable metrics, even as many of those migrants were routed towards the United States. From the perspective of the foreign policy apparatus, legibility matters more to democracy than democracy itself. The right kind of dictatorship concentrates authority, simplifies control, and clarifies intervention. Capital controls narrow transaction pathways. Sanctions compress trade into fewer, more visible routes. Maduro's Venezuela made the Western Hemisphere more legible to the global democracy order. Venezuela also made the BRICS-aligned order legible. Russian military advisors and financing, Chinese loans and infrastructure, Iranian fuel swaps and sanctions evasion, and Cuban security support all converged under Maduro. In other words, Maduro provided the Western world with a single reference point through which to interpret a hostile order. Maduro's continued presence also made the United States itself more legible to the supranational liberal order. For the transnational institutions that manage liberal democracy at the global level, the United States is both indispensable and dangerous. Its scale, its military capacity, its financial dominance, its domestic political volatility make it difficult to discipline. By anchoring a persistent external antagonist in the Western Hemisphere, Venezuela helped bound U.S. behavior. Sanctions had to be aligned with allies, military action had to be deferred to coalition logic, diplomatic initiatives had to pass through international forums. In practice, Maduro's Venezuela forced the United States to act as one node among many, rather than as a unilateral sovereign. Venezuela helped keep the United States inside this multilateral script. The longer Maduro remained, the more the United States was compelled to act through the same structures that limit it. All of this legibility came at a human cost. Millions of Venezuelans fled. Many more died. Their suffering was converted into reports, aid flows, migration metrics, policy justifications. The system did not fail the Venezuelan people. It used them. Breaking that equilibrium required someone willing to violate the norms that preserved it. It required Donald Trump precisely because he did not treat regime change as a managed procedural process. By making it explicit, unilateral, and disruptive, he is shattering a carefully maintained world order. This is why the backlash is so intense. Trump dared to confront a global system that had learned to live with Maduro and profit from his stability. Trump's sin was never regime change. It was introducing uncertainty into a system designed to see everything except the people it governs. That is why they scream. They don't want to see the people they govern. Because if they see the people they govern, they might actually have an attack of conscience, and they might actually realize that what they've been doing this whole time has been wrong. But something interesting here. The deposing of Nicolas Maduro has had an impact on more than just the Venezuelan people. It was an interesting quote from the president. He said, "China can buy all the oil they want from us." He also said they would be taking over the oil supply of Venezuela. But 7 words, this from Shanaka Anselm Pereira. The de-dollarization thesis just died. Trump to oil executives on Friday, Russia and China can purchase Venezuelan crude, but they purchase it through American firms, in American dollars, under American terms. In other words, the petrodollar just got a shot in the arm. 300 billion barrels of oil, the largest proven reserves on Earth, and they are now controlled by the United States. For a decade, the entire BRICS architecture was built on one premise: escape dollar dependency through alternative energy trade. This is something that James Rickards wrote about in books like Currency Wars, which if you haven't read his books, I would strongly suggest that you do that. They're really good. Russia sells discounted crude to China in yuan renminbi. The shadow fleet enables sanctions evasion, and non-US dollar settlements grow quarter over quarter. That architecture assumed adversaries could access non-Western supply, and Trump just eliminated the non-Western supply. China bought 80% of Venezuelan exports before the blockade. Beijing's teapot refiners depended on discounted Mere crude delivered by shadow fleet tankers running dark across the Atlantic. But those tankers are now being seized. Those flows are being rerouted. And the crude that remains will now be sold by companies like Chevron Texaco and ExxonMobil in dollars. This is not an oil policy. This is monetary warfare disguised as energy security. Every barrel China purchases from US-controlled Venezuela strengthens the dollar. Every settlement funds American treasury flows. Every transaction reinforces the architecture BRICS spent years trying to escape. Russia understood this immediately. Moscow sent a submarine to protect one tanker. That submarine had to retreat. Now Russian crude competes with Russian ally crude being sold by American firms. The irony is perfect. Russia spent blood and treasure cultivating Maduro for 20 years. China lent $50 billion secured against future oil deliveries. And all the collateral has been seized by Washington. Trump says we're open for business. He's not offering partnership. What he's offering are terms of surrender. You will either buy from us, the Americans, or buy nothing. You will pay in dollars, or you will pay a lot more. You will accept American intermediation, or lose access to Western Hemisphere heavy crude permanently. The multipolar energy order required one thing to function: supply diversity that excluded American control. Venezuela was that cornerstone. And now, Venezuela's gone. This is a reassertion and a shot in the arm to what Henry Kissinger did well over 50 years ago with the creation of the petrodollar. I should love to see what this does for oil and petrol prices, especially the prices that we pay at the pump. I pray it means things get cheaper. Interesting story if true. Florida will consider a law banning remittances from illegal aliens, banning illegals from having bank accounts, and banning illegals from obtaining any loan or homeowner assistance. Also automatically designates illegals in a car crash at fault for the purposes of insurance claims. Overwhelming evidence is required to overturn this. Representative Bernie Jacques' massive bill provisions heightens penalties for employers of illegals, bans the state from issuing licenses to illegals, bans illegals from getting any loans or homeowner assistance, bans remittances to be sent from an illegal, bans illegals from having a bank account. And at fault automatically goes to the illegal driver until overwhelming evidence is presented. Quote, we must remove the magnets for illegal migration and hold those who provide those magnets accountable. Based. This is the way, as Eric Doherty says in his tweet. And this is the way. More states need to do this. Honestly, this needs to be federal. It needs to be worldwide. Oh yes, from GB Politics. Leaked messages show Labour MPs urging the government to quit X and calling Elon Musk a fascist. As some of us have requested our government should start using other platforms such as Facebook, where most of our constituents are, as its main platform. That would really help to move the dial and show direction to others in the UK. If Trump can ignore other platforms and use his own different Truth Social as the main one, what's stopping us? Zoomer historian, quote tweeting, we are winning over the youth so effectively that the government is considering exile amongst boomers on Facebook. An alternate reality safe space. We own the future. Oh yes, we should look up what's going on in Iran. Word is still getting out of what's going on out there thanks to Elon Musk and Starlink. Photograph from Visegrad 24 of Iranian anti-regime protesters taking a picture with their Starlink terminal, thanking President Trump and Elon Musk for being able to get the information in and out of Iran after the regime shut down the internet in the entire country. Good on them. I'm told that Musk is providing free internet via Starlink to the people of Venezuela. And this was starting to go viral. I wish I could find the original video. Oh, here's a clip of it. Female protester in Iran lighting a picture of the Ayatollah Khomeini on fire and using that to light up a cigarette. Which, top tip for you, chat, don't smoke. Smoking's bad for you. We all know that, but still, the meme, it's good stuff. These photographs are of French women, French right-wing feminist activists from Collectif Nemesis, recreating the viral trend of Iranian women lighting their cigarettes with burning photos of the Ayatollah Khomeini. When will left-wing feminists show their support? They won't. They won't. In Iran, they are burning the mosques in a declaration they are done with Islam. You can understand why the BBC won't show this. From 4 hours ago, the Islamic Republic has turned off public lighting on the streets and deployed military drones on top of the crowd in Iran. People are using their mobiles to create lighting for each other. A joke from David Keyes, Khomeini in talks to flee Iran rules out California due to prohibitive wealth tax. Amnesty International finally issuing a statement, not condemning Iran's illegal killings of Iranians, but condemning the US for pulling out of NGOs. Their silence on Iran tells you exactly why the US pulled out in the first place. Nearly 2 million Iranians in the streets fighting tonight. At this stage, the revolution has spread to 512 locations, 180 cities, and 31 provinces. Now, this is no longer a protest. This is a revolution. Iranian girls speaking in French Islam is neither the religion of Iran nor that of ancient Persia. Islam was imposed upon us through torture, massacres, and rape by enslaving Iranians to convert them to Islam. The Iranians are Persians, but actually Zoroastrians. It appears that with the burning of the mosques, the Zoroastrians are having their revenge. Oh, here's the video. Here we go. Again, smoking bad for your chat, but that's peak right there. That's pretty based. Meanwhile, over in London, there's a hell of a flex. Hello, Ryan, welcome in. Indeed it is. Video of an Iranian protester removing the Islamic Republic flag and replacing it with a pre-1979 lion and sun flag at Iran's embassy in London. And it appears that on X, that is what the Iranian flag has been replaced with, at least when you use emojis on X. There he goes. Taking the Islamic Republic flag down. Getting a bit forceful with it. Standing up on the balcony there. Unfolding the flag. There it is. Beautiful symbology. The people want to go back. They want to go back to the way it was before the fall of the Shah and the rise of the Ayatollah. And if they keep up this momentum, I think they're going to have it too. Massive protest in and around Isfahan, the third largest city in Iran. Regime forces fleeing. But I want to try and use this to pivot back to British politics here for a bit. Ironic that the UK is threatening to shut down X on the same day Iran shut down the internet to prevent its people from criticizing the regime. The irony of our times.